calling all consumer goods business owners and marketing professionals. Does planning content ahead of time stress you out? Do you want to run Instagram and Facebook ads but just aren't sure where to start? If your answer is yes and yes, then our mini course was made for you. It's 100% free and packed with essential tactics that you can implement as soon as today. To join in, visit our website at umaimarketing.com/mini-course. All right, let's get on with the pod.
Welcome to the UMAI Social Circle, where we talk consumer goods tips to help business owners and marketers grow. We're Allison and Karen, co-founders of UMAI Marketing, and we are being joined here today with Katie Mleziva. Did I say that right?
You got it.
Okay, good. Of Real Food Brands. Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're excited too. So first of all, how's your week been?
Good. You know, the weather has been pretty good here in Wisconsin in the summer. We really rely on these summer months for some nice warm weather. So yeah, it's been good. Thanks.
Oh my gosh, we are opposite of the spectrum.
Right.
We cannot go outside right now unless you're going straight to water. We've actually been having rolling blackouts to preserve energy. So, yeah, a little jealous of the Wisconsin summer right now.
We'll talk in winter and then.
Yeah, right. Maybe we could split our time between Wisconsin and Texas, and that would be perfect. Oh man, that's awesome. Well, first of all, we'd love to just get your background, hear from you, how you got started, and where you are now.
Yeah, good. Well, I started my career at large companies. So American Girl, the doll and book and magazine company, and then Kraft Foods. And then I did it was 6 years, so I guess not that short, but in health insurance. And so the interesting thing was that I saw kind of the front end of the food at the big food companies, and then sort of sometimes the back end, what happens through the health insurance company when people aren't taking good care of themselves. And so all of these things, along with, starting to have my own family and my own health, just really led me to think I really want to use these skills that I have to work with natural food companies. And I specifically like smaller, more emerging natural food companies that are, I like to say, shaking up shopping carts, looking to do things differently. And so I left the corporate world and went out on my own to be a brand strategist, independent brand strategist. And so I have a network of, people such as yourselves that I collaborate with, but I'm a solopreneur, and I love working with smaller food brands and farms to really define their brand strategy, which I know that we will talk about a little bit more. But to me, it's just a lot more than selling food. It's about the sustainability side and the health side and the small business side. So there's lots of reasons why I feel lucky to do what I do every day.
So, Katie, brand strategy, you're a brand strategist. That's a term that a lot of people use. We hear so much, but it's kind of not clear to a lot of people and sometimes to us what exactly that means. So could you explain what brand strategy is for the regular old person who's never heard of it?
Absolutely. And, I'll start by saying that this is not just a food term. This really goes across all industries. So before I focused on food, I worked with all different kinds of businesses. And then I really said, this is where my passion is. So I'm going to focus here. So when we talk brand strategy, there's a common confusion between brand strategy and a visual brand. So your visual brand is your logo and your fonts and your colors and things that are very, very important. And when a lot of designers specifically are talking about brand strategy, they're talking more about visual brand. Some designers actually do both. They do the back-end strategy work to inform the design. Some designers prefer to have you share the strategy piece, and then they do the visual brand. So there's these two pieces to it. The visual brand is a piece of brand strategy. It's an outcome. So then you say, well, okay, so what is the bigger brand strategy is the way that I view it anyway. It's really it's almost more like your business strategy. It's not necessarily all the details that go into the business strategy, but it's more at that level of strategy in your business. It is the North Star that ties together everything that you do. So I like to explain it by sort of a 3-step process. So we define or refine your brand strategy, and that I'll share what that includes in just a second, and then align your entire team around that, or all the different areas of your business, and then activate. So a lot of people like to go right to activate, but it's hard to activate if you don't have these strategic inputs. So some examples of those inputs are things like, I like to just reference back to the 3 C's. So your consumers, your competitors, and your company, and your competitive advantages within your company, and what really sets you apart. So we take those pieces and we say, how are we going to position your brand to meet the needs of your consumers in a way that your competitors either can't or won't? And in doing that, there's a lot of work that goes into kind of doing that simple thing of positioning your brand. But in doing that, that sets the stage for aligning both the front and the back end of your business towards, where you're going. Like I mentioned, a North Star, that thing that you're working towards to continually deliver on that positioning that you've selected. So I know we'll break this apart a little bit throughout the conversation, but at the highest level, that's what it is. It's the thing that unifies everything that you do on the front and the back end of your business, both yourself and your team, to be working towards owning that position and serving your consumers' needs.
Yeah, I love how you said that this is what you do before you get into action. So just to really define that, does that, for people listening, this is what needs to happen before you go out and market your brand, or before you engage with a PR agency, or, maybe if you're already doing that, it's time to, step back and redefine the overall brand strategy. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of partners can get this information out of you, but I kind of say, why not come to the table with the basic information at least, and then the partners can ask questions and help you dig in further and refine it. But if you, and then I guess the point is, let them do the work and focus their energy and the time and your budget on the things that they do best, and come to the table with some of these foundational pieces so that then they can help bring it to life, versus trying to slog through it with you, drawing it out of you when you haven't set aside the time to think about it prior to engaging with, someone like yourselves, or web designers, or packaging designers, or any of the partners. I've heard multiple times people say, I know I really need to work on my brand strategy as my brand grows, but I'm going to do it after my website redesign. And I get it. Like, as much as I understand, my ideal world is not always the world. It really, you have to know who you're talking to and how your brand is differentiated, and the things, the high level messaging, as well as the support points. What kind of photography are you going to be using? So again, that visual brand does play into it, but even things, at the bigger picture, when you're developing your product formula, what are those guide rails that you're going to follow in order to, from the beginning, or reformulate a product recipe? So it really does guide everything. Whether you're doing this and wearing all the hats, or you've got a cross-functional team, it really guides everything that everyone does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just say, Katie and I had a chance to talk before this call, and, Karen and I, being in the service industry, we see this all the time with clients or people in our course members, where they outsource all these different endeavors, and all these outsourced teams are a little bit confused. They have a different idea of what they need to be doing or how they need to be doing it. And it's really you, the brand owner, that has to have that solidified and unify all your teams. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you want, and you might end up wasting time or spending money, things like that. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I like to think of it as a hub and a spoke. So typically with the size brands that I work with, they don't have a specific brand manager sometimes, but not always. So often then the owner of the business is still serving as that central point that is working with all the different team members. And so it's one of the hats that they need to wear is that brand manager hat, thinking about everything working together and the filter of, when you have a documented brand strategy that everyone is briefed on and then working against, and then you can put use that filter when you're reviewing creative or recipes or, partners or anything. It just really helps everyone go or, get on the same page. And there's obviously a lot of emotion when you're reviewing, let's say marketing execution, but this helps keep people in their logical brain as well. So, or at least have the conversation, I hear you on this. Also, this is where we said we wanted to take it. So this is why we went this route. And, at least it helps you tee up the conversation if somebody's kind of taking a different route than everyone had agreed on.
Yeah. So you just mentioned that if you don't have a brand manager on your staff, you kind of have to be that brand manager as the owner of your business. So what are some personality traits? What are some traits that make a really, really good brand manager so that our founders can listen and be like, okay, I don't have any of those. I might need to outsource this.
That's a really, really good question. So brand managers really, they are the Jack or Jill of all trades, where, in larger companies, you are often own the P&L, and you're working with financial folks, you're working with the packaging designers, you're working with the operations team, literally all the areas of the business, the buck stops with you. So being able to multitask, being able to rely on experts, other people who are giving you information, and you need to be able to process that and ask good questions, even though you know that you are not the expert in all those areas. So I guess selecting people and then trusting them to be your guides, that's a piece. There is that art of mix, or the mix of art and science, where there's like the quantitative side. So you have to be really great with the numbers, but then you also have to be able to think about the market research results and how that would, for example, play into creative design and marketing plans and things like that. So it really takes a lot of different sides of your brain. And when, at larger companies, that's often how it works, ownership of the P&L and running cross-functional teams. For smaller companies, sometimes the brand manager is more the one that is specifically keeping all of the marketing pieces on track to be cohesive and consistent. So I've seen it both ways. So in that case, it's more of someone who is a good project manager, somebody who has big picture thinking, but can also really get into the details and, proofread copy and make sure that it's, you're using this word over here and you want to use it consistently. And are you using it consistently throughout everything you do? So somebody who can bridge that big picture and really detail level thinking. Does that help?
Awesome. Okay, yeah, that's super helpful. Because I always think, like, when one of our brands is hiring a brand manager in past lives with other companies, I'm like, what all is that person doing? So that really is very helpful.
Good. I loved that role because you kind of have your hands in a lot of stuff. So I would say curiosity too, like always wanting to learn and be interested in what's going on is a good trait too, because there's always, you guys know, there's always a lot going on in businesses.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds like a fun job. Sounds like some really exciting, never boring. So you do talk about, so you have your define, you define and refine, align, and activate. That's your three-pronged strategy, right? Yeah. So what are some of the benefits of that define and refine, of really documenting that brand strategy?
Yeah. Okay, good. So, I mentioned some of the inputs that we look at: consumers and competitors and your own company's advantages. There's a little bit more that goes into it, obviously, but those are what I see as the inputs. And then the outputs of that process are things like your brand pillars. I'll come back to each of these, but brand pillars and personality and positioning and your brand essence. So, by pillars, what I mean is that as you're going through all of this, one of the first things that we're doing, so most of this is internal strategy at this point. Sometimes it will spark ideas that, teams will take and run with, but I like to say write first for internal, because if you're writing right away for external, the pressure is just so high to try to wordsmith. So right now we're just trying to get all the ideas down. So we've got our inputs, consumer, competitor, and company. Then we look at the pillars. So we say, okay, what are the three main legs that this brand stands on? So if I just had, a couple minutes to tell you about a brand, what would I say are the three most important things? Part of the brand strategy process is a benefit ladder where we tease apart the most functional attributes of a brand and ladder that up to the more emotional benefits. And so often that is one of the key pieces that feeds into the pillars. The pillars often have something about the product attributes that's really core to the brand, but then we don't want to just stop at product attributes. We want to make sure that we're also having something be central to the brand that is a more emotional connection with people. So the brand pillars are really something that's sort of an internal guide, but it also then, once you say, okay, these are the three things that my brand is all about, then it helps you with messaging to say, okay, and here's the 20 other things that I would say about each of those. And it sparks ideas for, people like yourselves, where you then know how to create strategies around bringing that to life. But the brand can bring to the table, I know myself and I know my brand, and here's the things that we stand for. So that's the pillars. Then there's the personality. So I like to say, if your brand was a person at a cocktail party, how would you introduce them? And so we use characteristics that can help, again, creative teams especially, bring that brand to life visually and in copywriting. And then the positioning is a statement that you get really succinct. So I like to think of this as kind of a funnel. You've got all your inputs at the top, and then we whittle down and we really are wordsmithing until we can be really concise in terms of that positioning statement that puts into words that idea that I was saying of how are you going to meet your consumers' needs in a way that in the way that your competitors can't or won't. And then one of the last two things is the essence. So if you just had a word or maybe two to boil everything down to that was the core of your brand that you wanted to permeate throughout everything that you do, what would that be? And that really helps people. We put this all on a one pager and they keep it on their desk, and sometimes they refer to the whole 30 plus pages if they want the more detail. But this one pager really helps people have a reference point to go back to. But that essence is something that really sticks with them, that they can, it like elicits a feeling as you think about that word. And that's what you want to make sure is that thread that runs throughout everything that you do. And then the last piece is the brand story of the definition phase. So I'm not a copywriter, but as part of my process, whether it's the online program or working one-on-one, we do have a story statement. So that is the kind of thing where it's a paragraph, it's high level, but it gives a partner that's going to work on the activation a sense of here's where we're going with the story of the brand. So just one more quick thing there. I like to say that the brand story there's a difference between history and a brand story. A brand history is a good place to start, but it's the past. And a brand story is where you're going and inviting people into. So that's sort of that jumping off point where I end the formal define, refine phase of the work. And then we start to say, okay, well, now how can we make this show up in everything that you do within the business and across all of the different players?
I really love, I think it was a part of the pillars where you move from functional to emotional. Is that right?
Yeah, it was as a lead into the pillars is the benefit ladder.
The benefit ladder. So love the benefit ladder, moving from functional to emotional. I feel like that's a step that a lot of brands, may miss. And just talk about, the functional aspects of their business, but to really attract and create a community and followers and people who love your brand, there has to be an emotional reason for them to want to purchase from you. I mean, to put it quite plainly. So I just think that's such an important step that, if you haven't thought of that as a business owner, or a brand marketer, then absolutely get to writing on paper wherever you take your notes and start thinking in that way. So you just mentioned all the work that needs to be done before the action. So how tell us more about how food business owners use all of this strategy on an ongoing basis to continue to build their brands.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that once you have this documented, the benefit is that it takes a lot of things that are in your head, or like Karen, I think it was you that mentioned that, different team members may be thinking different things, but it puts it in a documented place where everyone can reference it. So as I mentioned, a lot of people will put up this one pager in their, in a desk or like in a little plastic sleeve or somewhere where it's really readily available, so that literally as you're making any decisions throughout the day, at some point it becomes secondhand, but they reference it to say, okay, how did we say that? Or how did we want to say this? Or what was that, does this new opportunity align with what we said was our main focus? So they use it as sort of a litmus test. And that's it. I'll get a little bit more specific, but that's like at a really high level. It serves as this foundation of something that helps make decisions, because as you guys know, there's no end of opportunities when you're thinking about marketing plans or partners, or, there's so many ways that brands could go, but this helps you make sure that you're talking to the right people at the right time and partnering with the right, whether it's brands or vendors, or they can help you get there. And so that's one of the biggest ways that people use this, like, literally every day as a decision-making tool and kind of test to bump things up against. The other piece, though, is at a more specific level, thinking about making sure that the creative, just as one example, is consistent and cohesive and all telling the same story and moving people through the purchase process. So that's where, your expertise comes in as well, to make sure that that's happening. And once you know the brand strategy, to help your partners deliver on it. But without having a partner like you necessarily, people are sort of left to their own devices sometimes, or having multiple team members working on it. And so this allows people to make sure that they have consistency. And I know that sometimes people say consistent is boring, but consistent does not have to be boring. It's just making sure that, you can switch it up and surprise and delight people. It's making sure, though, that you are on strategy and on message, and it looks and feels and sounds like the same brand every time, so that you become recognizable and give people the words to be able to tell their friends and get excited about it. So you're actually doing people a disservice when you're trying to change things up too much. And so this serves as sort of the guardrails to be able to do that.
That's so important. I mean, we can think of so many brands that we have worked with where it's just like, we're doing that here and this there, and how does that match this? It's pretty wild how that can happen so quickly too, because it's like a on and off switch. It's just like, you think that everything's going one way, and it turns out that like all these things looked really jumbled and just pieced together, and they don't really fit in this perfect puzzle anymore.
Yeah. And I like to say that 1 + 1 = 3. So when people are, allowing you to do your thing and have it be cohesive and all work together, it's going to be so much stronger than trying to just piece it together. Now, I know that sometimes things change over time, and, you make a decision and say, okay, we're going to change something. And sometimes it takes a little while to roll things out, but that's different. That's intentional. What you're talking about is, it's not that someone's not a smart person. It's just that sometimes with brands, people get an idea, or someone else on the team gets an idea. And unless you've got this processor, or again, kind of test to bump it up against, you're right. It happens quickly. People make decisions, and then just to get it out the door. And then it's not all working together as well as it could be for the brand.
Yeah, totally. And on the note of happening quickly, growth happens quickly sometimes. And so when you start hiring people and you start hiring agencies to help, or internal employees to help, if it's not aligned, then you'll be moving backwards. So love that. Okay, so we talked about define and refine, and now we've talked a little bit about the align. But how does the second stage of aligning, using your North Star that you mentioned, how does this impact the business externally?
Yes. Okay. So that's a really good point. So there's the internal impact of the team being aligned, but then the external impact is sort of like we were mentioning, that the consumer is seeing a consistent brand. They know what to expect. You can still surprise and delight them with fun, creative, or fun new flavors, or showing up in places, distribution channels that they wouldn't expect, but it's still always strategic and on brand. So the consumer starts to really get to know what to expect from you and what to trust, that your products and your brand delivers. So that is one of the biggest things, is that internally you're aligned, but then externally people know what to expect and how to talk about the brand. So I was mentioning word of mouth. If we are consistent and people know how to talk about the brand and what those highlights are, you get sick of talking about the same things over and over as a brand leader, but people need to hear it so many times, because we all get hit with so many messages in a day. So when you're consistent, then people start playing those messages back to you, maybe in comments, but then that, okay, this is good. They're using my words, and then they know how to go describe it to somebody else as well. So we're listening to use their words because we want to talk in their language, but then it's really cool also when we hear them playing back what we're trying to get across too, of what the benefits of the brand are, because it feels like they're really starting to get it and excited to share with other people then.
I love that you hit on that again, because that really resonated with me when you said you're giving people the words to talk about your brand. That is so cool, and such a goal, of any brand, to have that word of mouth marketing and to hit it really hard, that people know exactly how to talk and share your brand in a delightful way, in the way you want them to share it. So that's really powerful. So we talked define, refine, we talked align, we talked a bit about activate. So using all the work you've done on a daily basis until it's ingrained in your head, and also sharing with any of your marketing partners during that onboarding process, and making sure that they know that they need to follow these guidelines. So anything else with activate in terms of using all this work that you've just done?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. There is one thing I want to mention, is that it is a little daunting sometimes to do this work, whether you're just starting up and setting a strong foundation, or you're looking to scale and realizing that you need a little refinement before you can really take off. And so once you get through the defining or refining, that seems like the hard part. And it is a lot of work, but it's, as you can see, the efficiency and cohesiveness, it really pays out. But the thing that can feel overwhelming then is that, where do you start? You've got everything then that you want to go and change. And we know that it's impossible to change everything all at once. So what I like to suggest is to list out all the different areas of your business that this would impact. So this starts to happen in the align phase, where you list it out at like a 10,000 level of all the people who need to be educated or share, have this shared with them. So you're not starting totally from scratch, but you look at that list and then you kind of break it down further and say, okay, website, social media posts, emails, a lot of the things that you work on, but also then thinking about ingredient labels or packaging design, or you start to really think about all the different tactical things in the business and say, I like to have a chart, just because I love frameworks. I think it helps, streamline complex topics. And so if you label the chart high impact and low impact, and then high effort and low effort, and you plot out these tactical things, you can see which ones are high impact, high effort, and which ones are high impact, low effort. So starting with the high impact, low effort are the things that, are usually the best place to start. So maybe it's a website where you can't, it's a lot of effort to redo the entire website, but maybe you can start to sprinkle in photos and copy that support the new brand, or maybe it's even just changing a couple of headlines or the About Us page, or, there's some things that you can do that are sort of quick and easy that can help align faster, or maybe you can start to influence the social media posts or emails. So all the things that you all are working on, and just thinking about how can we do those first. Now, maybe a whole new website redesign or a complete product reformulation or a new product that you want to launch, those kind of things might be further down the road. So you plot those in a different box, but we really want to focus on those low effort, high impact opportunities. But then it's nice because you've got them all listed out. You can kind of let go of the ones that you see are high impact and low effort, because you're like, you know what, I may get to that, I may not, but it's a lot of effort and it's not going to be a really big impact on my brand. So I have other places to focus, and it's really nice because it kind of releases the pressure of having to do everything, because at least you've got it captured there and you can work your way around the box. So hopefully that's helpful in case anyone starts to feel overwhelmed once they do their brand strategy work.
That is incredibly helpful. We are big on seeing on really trying to defeat overwhelm, just like you said, because this food and beverage business it's so, there's so many elements to it. It's so easy to get overwhelmed. Thinking about your brand strategy, especially if you've been around for a bit and you haven't done this work yet, I can see how that can be extremely overwhelming. So I really like how you laid that out and just, work smarter, totally, instead of just trying to overhaul everything.
Totally. Well, a lot of times I think founders, and what I was going to say is I think sometimes they just kind of think that the team has the same vision in their head, and it's not intentional. They're brilliant, but not everyone can just know the things, all those brilliant thoughts. So that's one reason why documenting and getting it out and having everyone on the same page, it can be such a relief for both the founder who's taking those thoughts out of their head and synthesizing them, but then also the team who doesn't have to guess and try to draw it out.
So one last question for me. And this comes from us always using other brands as inspiration. We love looking at brands that are doing it right to kind of help us, give us ideas and help us navigate some things. And something that you said earlier really resonated, where you said you want to give, and we've said it many times after, we want to give the brand, we want to give our audience words to describe our brand. And so the first brand that comes to my mind is Omsom. They say the same words over. They're a proud and loud Asian ingredient product that wants to have bold flavors. Like, I'm literally saying the words that they say all of the time. Yes. So what are other brands that you see that just like kill their brand positioning?
Yeah. One that comes to mind, and I don't work with them, but I just have loved it, is Recess, the drink Recess, because I can rattle off several things. There's the positioning is so clear in terms of, kind of taking a break or having a recess. I think it's an antidote to modern times is one of the things that they say on the website and on the can. And then the other one, I think on the website it is like that we all have too many tabs open in our brain. So they set up so perfectly the idea that like we are busy and we need to just, it's not that we like necessarily deserve it or should do it. It's like we need this. Like you need to take a step back and just let yourself breathe and like reconnect, reboot, maybe they should say, if they're talking about the technology stuff. So their visual brand also is very different. Like it's, when you see the website, it is it's not a traditional look. And at first I wasn't sure what to think, but then I was like, you know what, they own it and they're consistent across everything that they do. And so I think that's one where the product and the packaging and the website and the social, like to me, everything really aligns very well. Omsom is a great example too, though.
Yeah, love that. Recess is fun. And I mean, you can get exciting with all the technology. Like, have you tried unplugging and plugging yourself back in?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so many things you could do with that, which is really fun.
They need you.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, you can hire us, Recess. Don't worry. Awesome, Katie.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we just want to sum it up with, we've kind of talked about, the benefits of getting your brand strategy down pat. Can you just tell us, everyone probably wants to know in just a concise way, what actually does a well thought out brand strategy do to the bottom line? How does it increase your overall ROI? Why is it so important?
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest way to say it is that there are no guarantees. We're always testing and learning and optimizing. But if you have an hour to spend or $1 to spend, and you know who you're going to talk to and what messages resonate with them because you've tested and learned over time, and how to engage with them and what messages to tell them. So basically, you've worked your way into knowing what works. And so you might not have known the day one, but you went in with an assumption versus just, a guess and shooting things, throwing things at the wall. You went in with a hypothesis, and it's testing and learning. And so it makes that dollar and that hour so much more efficient because you are focused, and you can optimize from there. So, there's not a specific dollar amount or percentage or something that I can give, but it is all about focus and consistency and having everyone on the same page. So just quickly, I guess the one other thing that's hard to quantify is the team morale. Having people know what they're rallying behind and getting really excited about being a part of something. That's really hard to quantify too, but the productivity and sort of advocacy that they'll provide for the brand too, because they know where they're going and what role they play. That is something that is, I think it does impact the bottom line, but it's really hard to say exactly how.
Oh man, that's such a good one that that's the last thing I thought you were going to say. But right when you said it, it was just like, oh my gosh, that's so unbelievably true.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I can remember past lives, like a company that did that, and we knew what the mission was and we knew what we were doing there, and the passion that you had for it was so palpable. And the exact opposite with a different brand that was kind of just like a little lackluster on like, what are we doing here? So team morale, that's a good note. Well, Katie, thank you so much for joining us. You have dropped a million nuggets of wisdom. If somebody wants to keep learning from you or get in contact with you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned linking to my website. So realfoodbrands.com is the place where you can connect to me through social media, get podcast episodes. And I'll just call it that you can get a free brand checkup scorecard there. So there's 25 questions where people can give themselves an honest assessment of 1, 2, or 3. And nobody needs to see it. You can share it with me if you want to. But it's really just a way to help you go through some of these, some of the subsections of the things we've talked about today to say, how am I doing and where am I doing great and where can I improve?
Thanks. And we will link to all of your social, your email, your website. And Katie also has a podcast, and we can link to that as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Katie.
Good. Thank you.
UMAI Social Circle is a CPG agency-driven podcast based out of Austin, Texas. We're excited to share more behind-the-scene insights, chats with industry leaders, and whatever else we learn along the way. Follow us on Instagram at UMAI Marketing, or check out our website, umaimarketing.com. Catch you back here soon.